Hey, it is Xennial Gamer here today to show you guys the Bruiser Turn 2 super slow 230 speed team that I've used to climb 400 points in the last 4 days and get from C2 to Guardian. Now, a couple of disclaimers up front, guys. Obviously, my box is really deep. I don't have any of the great meta LDs, but I have pretty much all the other options, and my runes are really strong. So this is not a how to build my team video, but I am going to show you all the runes. I'm going to walk you through the process of what I did to change up my season. The hope here is that if you hear my thought process and you see my builds, then you can apply this to your own boxes and make something work for you in the following season. One last thing, I did a video a few weeks ago that explained how I go about optimizing an RTA box. I'm going to throw an info card up on screen. Now, I know this video probably just sounds like, oh, I'm trying to brag about making a push-up or something. That's not the case, guys. This was me live on stream just like 5 days ago. I'm lost. I am honestly and genuinely lost. I have no idea what to play anymore. So guys, you can see, I had no idea. This was probably my roughest RTA season. I could not figure out how to counter the 3, 4, 5 stripper, like pretty much every team I saw was like a minimum of 3 AoE strips with control, and I was so lost for this entire season. I did get to G2. I got as high as like rank 700 for one little stretch in the middle of the season, but especially towards the end of the season, because the meta evolved a little bit more mid-season to where people started bringing in the 3rd and 4th AoE strip, I struggled for weeks. Now, huge shout out to Ace Gaming. He's been telling me for ages to play the Molly. Those of you guys who know that, or who watch my streams, you know I'm not a huge fan of Molly. But what Ace had seen watching a lot of high-level replays is that the Molly was causing the AoE strip teams to pivot out into more of a turn 2 style play, or at least more of a kind of cleave style, but not AoE control, which was basically what the type of game I wanted to play. I wanted to play turn 2. This season I was very stubborn. I refused to play almost anything swift. I did not want to play turn 1. I wanted to play on my own terms, and I was struggling with it. So we tried the first pick Molly, and it did exactly that. It caused people to pivot out and start playing more of a turn 2 game, which is where I'm gonna shine. Now, the funniest part about all of this is that whenever they don't pivot out and they stick with control, Molly still does nothing. I still lose like 90% of the fights. So I don't understand exactly why it scares people away, but I am happy that it does. And so with that said, I'm going to be showing you the runes and artifacts of each of the monsters. Now, I don't want this video to be crazy long. If I were to evaluate 20 or 30 monsters, this would be a super long video. With a lot of stuff that a lot of people can't necessarily emulate. So I'm just going to have them in the background while I talk about the overall theorycraft behind building the team. So we've got the Molly showing up right now. This was the first monster I built, and I am going to continue to show you the monsters in the order that I built them. So basically, once I realized that the Molly was causing people to pivot out and run 2 or less AoE strippers, which is something I could deal more with, the goal at that point became to make my teams as tanky as I could while still retaining enough damage that I could kill people. And at the same time, I wanted to work some resistance in on several of the monsters so that I would have the ability to try and play resistance if it was a turn 2 versus turn 2 team. Resistance really has basically no value against AoE strip control because all those monsters are going to be max accuracy. But when you get into more of a turn 2 style team, like if you get somebody to play a Barbara or something like that, monsters that tend to be built with 50% accuracy or less, sometimes much less, the resistance all of a sudden is going to play a role. On top of that, I also wanted to make sure that I had a good variety of attributes so that I could use attribute advantage in my favor, and specifically what I was trying to do was force the strippers to glance. So basically, let's say that the enemy drafts Water Ryu Chung to start off with. That already tells me they don't have Yogan because Yogan would always be the first pick, which means I have the choice. I can play Heavy Fire and try to force the Chung to glance, or I can play Heavy Wind and try and force the Ryu to glance. More often than not, I pivoted into the Heavy Fire because Karnal and Rica both have the opportunity to solo an entire enemy team. Okeanos also has the opportunity to control a team. All 3 of them can be played in really strong bruiser builds, and all 3 of them can do really big artifact damage. As you can see, like with the Karnal, you get lots of additional damage by X, and so those 3 against the Chung tends to play really well. Hey guys, I want to just take a quick moment to give a shout out and a thank you to today's video sponsor, the Huawei App Gallery. Guys, as many of you know, I've been partnered with Huawei since the start of June. I'm excited to announce that we've extended our partnership through the end of July. Through this partnership, you guys are able to get amazing discounts such as these coupons that you see right here behind me, 24 euros off a 100 euro pack. So that's 24%. But on top of that, Huawei always gives you 10% in cashback points. So we scroll up right here, you can see you get 10% back in Huawei points. And you can actually access 2 of these coupons every 24 hours. And if you achieve VIP status, you get another 15% off on top of all of those other discounts. So that means your total discount can be almost 50% on a pack. It is an insane deal, guys. It's the reason I'm still partnered with them, and the reason I am still doing these particular sponsored videos is because it's something I really believe can bring real value out to all of our subs. Guys, you know I'm not free to play. There's no doubt that I'm not free to play, and I would not be able to afford a lot of the packs that I buy on Summoner's War if I wasn't able to get these discounts. So, guys, if you are paying full price for your packs, stop right now. Check out the link in the video description below, and then check out this link right next to me, xennialgaming.com/AG coupon. I'm also going to put a link in the video description below where you can check out a video that explains how to install App Gallery, how to set it up. It's a 5-minute thing, guys. Seriously, it's super easy. 5 minutes to set everything up. So guys, that's it. Real simple. Once again, huge shout out and thank you to the App Gallery for continuing our partnership and continuing to bring these awesome discounts out to all of the channel subscribers and all of the video viewers. And on that note, back to the video. Now, another thing that I had to keep in mind was that my monsters needed to be able to survive a Seara bomb. So everything I built, pretty much I shot for a minimum of 28,000 HP, assuming I would use an HP lead, gets me up into that like 34, 35,000 range with my towers and with the HP leader skill, which gave me the ability hopefully to survive a Seara bomb and then get either healed or cleansed with either the Molly or the Lulu that I'm playing every single match. In addition to that, it was really important to me that I had monsters that would be able to cut and do some sort of disabling effect on the enemy team. So you guys just saw the Fang. He is a monster that I've played quite a bit because he gains attack bar boost, or attack bar every time he's attacked. Obviously, we'll get to Diana. She does the same. And then the Xing Zhe has the opportunity to do those revenge stuns. Now, this philosophy does not work against 4 or 5 AoE strippers, because even if you are able to cut in and slow down the enemy team when they have, you know, a Yogun followed by a Water Ryu, followed by a Ken, followed by a Chung, or whatever their turn order is, they just take away your attack bar. You never get a turn. Even if you stun the enemy one time, it's not a big deal. But when the enemy only brings in 2 strippers, or at least if you can... if the enemy only brings in 3 strippers and you can ban one out and only deal with 2, and preferably only 1 control unit, if you can get a stun or some sort of disablement on the enemy team, or glancing or something to cut, then you have a chance to get a turn. Now, the Seara build here is one of my favorites. You guys will notice she is not Violent Will, she is double Revenge Will, and there's some math behind this. So, Seara, 22% chance to proc, which is incredibly valuable when your Seara is in the lead taking turn 1, because sometimes you can actually drop 2 bombs. But in order to do that, you usually need to be playing your Seara at 247 plus speed with a speed lead and max speed tower in order to get her onto 5 ticks so she can turn cycle ahead. That doesn't speed tune with anything on my team. When you play a slower Seara, which goes into my slower bruiser build team, you don't always manage to get ahead, especially against a speed buff, so the violent proc doesn't necessarily benefit you that much to begin with. On top of that, playing turn 2 means my Seara most of the time doesn't even get a turn. She's always going to be the first target of the enemy, so even if my team gets a turn, the Seara doesn't. But here's the thing, when you're on double revenge, that's a 30% chance to turn cycle and basically get in front of the enemy. But more importantly, whichever enemy procced your revenge counter no longer has immunity. So if Seara procs the revenge at any point, she can immediately stun an enemy unit, which is ultimately more important when you're trying to play against the control turn 2 meta. The most important thing you can do is disable an enemy unit to break that cycle of control, which means you don't even really care about the Seara bomb damage at that point. You just want to set things up so your team can take turns And that's what those revenge procs can do. Now, it's only a 30% chance, but if Seara gets hit by 3 AoEs, then technically, somebody would math it out. You guys will bust me in the comments if I guess it, but it's probably something like 75 or 80% chance that she'll revenge once out of 3 times, which means that you've got a really good opportunity to cut in and stun disable one of the enemies. So, absolutely in love with this build for a turn 2 team. Still don't love that I'm relying on a 30% revenge proc RNG based thing, but I think there's a lot more value in this build than there was in a violent build for a turn 2 team. Now, of course, no turn 2 team is going to be complete without a Juno. I find that I actually don't use her all that much. You do need to pick your spots with her pretty well when you're playing the type of team that I'm playing. She doesn't always fit in great, but when I do have an opportunity to use her, I mean, she's Juno, guys. She's super strong. She fits in great. I did want my Juno to do a little bit more damage so you can see the higher attack, and part of the reason for that is because the artifacts, I didn't prioritize Juno's artifacts as much as I did some of the other monsters that I'm drafting more frequently, so she doesn't have the greatest artifact damage, so we tried to make up for that a little bit with attack. Now, at this point, we start to move into more of our designed counters. So Kaki, for example, is specifically a counter to Ragdoll and Artemil. He does have some occasional use outside of that, like if the opponent is overly wind heavy. Once again, you'll notice I was just trying to make sure that he had enough HP that he wasn't too vulnerable to a Seara, although I don't use him against Seara all that often. Now, Beelzebub, unfortunately, is just not very usable in this meta outside of anti-cleave. There are some chances to use him as a 5th pick, but generally speaking, if you bring him into anything that has any kind of reset opportunity, he's a dead pick. So he's mostly just a 5th pick or for anti-cleave, but with that said, when you use him in the right spots, he is still pretty good. And he is the only LD5 I have that really works for me in my team in RTA. Now with the Ethna build, one thing that's important to note is that because I am playing turn 2, most of the time when I draft her, I use her own leader skill, which is why she's at the 67 crit rate. Gives you that basically 100 crit rate, taking advantage of the leader skill. Also of note, earlier on, you may have noticed that the Molong had extremely low crit rate, and I run Ethna and Molong together a lot, so the Molong actually is at 91 crit rate with the Ethna lead, and he can do some really good damage when you've got him up over 50k HP like I do. For Bolverk, I've run him on both Shield Will Revenge and Shield Will Nemesis. I actually think I preferred the Nemesis build, but he did land on Revenge in this case. I'm not using him very often. I will note, I think he would be much better with more HP and less defense. This is just the way the runes kind of shook out for him. And again, he's mostly a counter when the enemy is going out with really heavy buffs. So, like once in a while, you may see a Vigor, and I tend to prefer Ethna over Bolverk as a Vigor counter, but Bolverk is a really good Vigor counter. Once in a while, the enemy may grab a Molong with a couple of buffers, and the Bolverk is a counter to that. For the Haegang, I am mostly only using him as a Gianna counter. Now, earlier in the season, I tried to use him a lot more. He is a really good monster, but the fact that he's the only one who does what he does, and he doesn't do damage, makes it really hard to fit him into a team that's going to win, because basically you wind up with too many supports if he's not in a damage build. You know, like let's say, especially because I'm starting off with the Molly and the Lulu, right? So if I wind up with Molly, Lulu, Haegang +2, they can let the Haegang through and not really worry about him because I have no damage on my team. So he's pretty much, for me, just a Gianna counter. Oki, I have found that I don't even know if I've drafted Oki yet, maybe once or twice when the opponent was also playing a slow turn 2 team, and I had Seara in there for like to counter an early Water Ryu or something, and I thought that I could get the Oki in front to do a reset. But for the most part, I'm finding that I prefer Fire Bison and Rica over the Oki. Oki is amazing in a control team, and he's really good in a turn 2 team. This isn't a criticism on him. I actually think Oki is still really good. I just think the Fire Bison and the Rica fit my drafts more. Speaking of Rica, I was able to get her into a max resistance build, which I was really happy about. The accuracy is a little on the low side, but considering the times at which I draft Rica, I am okay with that. Now, the unfortunate thing, I wish it was skill 3 accuracy, not skill 2 accuracy on the artifact, but this was just the artifact that fit her. But again, for the most part, I'm using Rica into control teams, which are monsters that are not built on resistance, so I felt like I could get away without as much accuracy on her as part of the trade-off to keep her in a max resistance build. A lot of times I'm using Rica in a combination, I think I mentioned this earlier, in a combination with Fire Bison when the opponent has Chung plus only one other stripper. Then I ban out the other stripper, and I ideally will have 3 fire monsters along with Molly, all having a 65% chance for Chung to glance, which gives me a better chance to survive that initial control push by the opponent. The Triana here for me is primarily meant to counter Japanese cleaves, or kind of like the Lucian type cleave. The fact that she's in Will Runes makes her not as good against Daphnis. She has max resistance, so I can try to use her against Daphnis, but it is still pretty dangerous. In the past, I like to build my Triana with more HP than I've got right now, also more defense. I usually built her a lot tankier, but this particular build, I went more for speed tuned with the team, so she's got about 20-25 more speed than she normally does. A little bit of extra crit rate and accuracy as well. But overall, she's basically there just to counter those like pure cleave teams, which we very rarely see these days. Diana was one of the monsters that got nerfed for me when I did my overhaul. I find that I like Fang more than Diana in most instances, and then when the Diana is a better fit than the Fang, she really didn't need to be quite as strong as I had her before. So the biggest thing that Diana lost here really was about 20-25 crit damage, but she also did lose one of her artifacts, which had given me like an extra 20 accuracy on the skill too. The 13 accuracy is pretty low. Every now and then I can get caught going into a turn 2 max resistance team, and Diana's really not able to strip anything. But because I'm using the Fang more often, this build, you know, as you get further in your box, kind of the reason I'm making a point of this, as you get further in your box, you're going to have to start making choices. You can only put your best sets on so many monsters before you run out of best sets. At this point, I think Diana was the 14th monster I built, and so I had to make some trade-offs. Anavel is another monster that I built as a niche counter. I'll be honest, I haven't had a lot of success with her. I'm not sure if I'm just picking her at the wrong times, or if she just doesn't quite fit my overall team comp, but she definitely has a losing record, and she's mostly fallen out of my rotation right now. This was the build that I went for her, so it could be also just that the particular build I chose for her wasn't the best build to fit my team. That does happen sometimes, and if I did want to use her more, I would probably try to rebuild her at this point, or at least go back and look at my replays and figure out why I'm losing with her and see if I'm just picking with her at the wrong times. I did do a max resistance build for the Fran. Now, Fran was a later build for me because I'm building my team mostly around Lulu. I will say that hurt me a little bit because Fran with great artifacts can do some amazing damage, and when the opponent takes Lulu, I do use my Fran quite a bit. Be nice if I had more additional damage on her artifacts, but one thing you will notice, that 16% attack increasing effect offsets the fact that her actual attack is a little bit low and helps make sure that I get some more healing from her. So I kind of traded off that artifact damage for some additional healing through the artifacts instead. Loren, for me, for the most part, is only in there to counter really slow Mo-Long type teams, like a Mo-Long, Harmonia, Icarus. You throw a Loren in the mix, and she either becomes a force ban, or she can really mess up the opponent's turn order. Because I'm actually running a Mo-Long, I don't really use Loren very often, but she is there just in case I need her. And then, obviously, in that type of team, what you're really looking for is just a Loren that's super, super tanky with an emphasis on HP, because the Mo-Long will usually target her first. The more HP she has, the more HP Mo-Long will lose when he tries to Reckless her. Now, the Taranys build, I was bringing him in as a kind of pivot pick for when the opponent is in a turn 2 bruiser team with a Daphnis. That was the idea, was to give myself some resurrect. Taranys and Beelzebub used to work amazingly well together, and so that was why I built the Taranys, but I've tried him a couple of times, and again, I've just had no success. There is way too much reset in the current meta. Reset destroys both Taranys and Beelzebub, but on top of that, the strip into kind of cleave-heavy monsters, even though Taranys can survive a Seara bomb in this build, the enemy oftentimes was able to just kill my Taranys twice before I ever got a turn, and then they could pretty much just ignore the Beelzebub while they worked in a 4v2 situation on my other 2 monsters. So although he's ruined, I don't see myself really picking him all that often any further. However, these are the artifacts that we use for him also. And the last build I've had time to do so far is the Ariel, and you guys can see this is a really weird build. 2600 defense with very low HP on the Ariel. The concept here is basically as an anti-Savannah. So a lot of times I see Savannah teams that are included with heavy debuffers like a Fire Bison or a Nephthys or something like that. By doing the Ariel build like this, the Savannah can't defense break me, and since the rest of my team is really tanky, it gives me an opportunity to cut in with the Ariel and turn the fight around. Now, I actually just did this build. I haven't even played Ariel with this build, not one match yet, so I don't know exactly how well it's going to work, but that was the concept behind it. Now, last thing for this video is how you globally speed tune a team across like 30, 40 plus monsters. You guys can see I'm not completely built out yet, but I am going to be building 41 monsters for my RTA box by the time I'm done. And again, I mentioned earlier, so we had the info card earlier on the video that shows you how you decide your prioritization and your speed tuning, but then once you know which order you want them to go in, you still have to actually build sets that put them in that order, because you want to know that whatever 5 monsters you draft, they will always go in an order that complements each other. So I came up with this little spreadsheet right here. You guys can see there's a formula up in the top column. This spreadsheet I'm actually dropping in our Discord server. Well, not this spreadsheet, but a template of this spreadsheet I'm dropping in our Discord server in the useful links channel. So there's a link to our Discord server in the video description. If you want to join in, you can download this spreadsheet so you don't have to copy the formula off the video. But basically what we've got here is our speed. It's a very simple formula. We've got our speed tower, we've got our leader skill. Then we ask what is our combat speed with no leader skill, which is really just 100% plus speed tower. And then what is it with leader skill? Now, as I globally speed tune, I don't run any 33 speed leads at all. But if I did run 33 speed leads, then I would want to see my speed tuning with both 33 and 24. The reason for that is because some monsters have significantly higher base speeds than others. So for example, this Xing Zhe has a 117 base speed, or a better example, let's take a look at our Ganymede. So Gany's got a 113 base speed, and in my case, I want Gany to act behind Taranys. Taranys is a 218 total speed. So what if I made my Gany 216 speed? We can see here that he's got the same combat speed as the Taranys, with the speed tower but no speed lead. However, he's still acting 4 speed in front of the Taranys when you use a speed lead. So if I know that I may run a Seara with Gany sometimes, it means I need to run my Gany slower. I can come in here and I can see 213 is still too fast with a 24 speed lead. But if I put him at 211, now he's going to consistently act behind my Taranys. So when I run my builds, I use this spreadsheet to tell me what the bottom and top speed ranges are. So Gany is easy because we want to run him at the bottom. But what about when I was running, and let's go ahead and just sort this list. We're going to take largest to smallest. What about when I was running the build for Xing Zhe specifically? So in the case of Xing Zhe, I need him to act behind my Loren, and I want him to act in front of my Ethna, because not that I'm likely to run Loren, Xing Zhe, Ethna together. I'm pretty unlikely to run it. But if I did, I want the Loren to strip into defense break, and then the Xing Zhe is a backup defense break, and then the Ethna is going to nuke out or do all that extra damage to get a stun. So as I'm figuring out my Xing Zhe, I know that I also probably want him to act, just for argument's sake, let's say I want him to act in front of Ariel. I don't actually, but just for argument's sake, let's say I did. Now I've got to take a look at this spreadsheet, and I'm going to say, okay, we need a combat speed with a speed lead that is between 274 and 276. So we put in this 229, and we know that's the only possible speed he can be. So this spreadsheet right here is how I did my global speed tuning. And you guys, if you don't want to nerd out quite this far, you certainly don't have to go this far. But if you're interested in the spreadsheet, again, there's a template in Discord. And on that note, guys, that's how I built my team to hopefully get a Guardian finish, coming back from like my roughest season ever and from being C2 at the start of the final week in a meta that I don't really do very well in. And it all tied back to, first figuring out how to get the opponent to pivot into a game that I'm more comfortable playing, which all credit goes to Ace for that one, because I don't think I ever would have tried the Molly, to be honest. And then from there, it came down to completely rebuilding my team in the matter of like a day or two, so that I've got a bunch of monsters that really play into a similar team concept, allowing me that flexibility to kind of pivot through my drafts once we get into that turn 2 playstyle. Anyway, guys, hopefully this video will help. As always, I appreciate you watching. and we'll see you next time. Hey, it is Xennial. Oh, no, wait, this is the outro. My bad. Hey guys, if you want to see more content, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications. It's your support that makes me want to create continuing content. I thank you guys for the support, as always, and we'll see you in the next video. Anyway guys, hopefully this video was helpful. Of course, as always, I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.